That cold evening, no one expected a rusty metal door to change a life. What started as just another abandoned storage unit became a story the whole town tried to explain, and few had the courage to tell. Before we begin, subscribe and turn on the bell. Here we show that behind locked doors and forgotten boxes, there are still human hearts. Elena gripped the steering wheel tighter as the sun dipped low over the sprawl of warehouses, painting the sky in bruised oranges and purples. The old sedan rattled along the cracked asphalt of the industrial park on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where dreams went to rust alongside forgotten machinery. She was 38, but the lines around her eyes made her feel twice that, lines etched by too many nights staring at the ceiling, wondering how she'd keep the lights on for her daughter Mia, 8 years old, with her father's curly hair and a laugh that could still pierce the fog of Elena's grief. But the laugh came less often now, drowned out by the stack of overdue bills on the kitchen table. Divorced 3 years ago after Tom's accident on the oil rig, gone in an instant, leaving her with a mortgage she couldn't pay and a child who asked too many questions about why Daddy wasn't coming home. Elena had sold what she could, the good jewelry, the extra furniture, even her wedding dress at a garage sale, but it wasn't enough. The storage unit auction was her last shot. A Hail Mary whispered to whatever gods listened to single moms scraping by on part-time shifts at the diner. She'd heard the stories, people flipping junk for cash, turning trash into a fresh start. Why not me? She'd told herself that morning, folding the last of her savings into her pocket. $1, $200, every penny from Mia's piggy bank included, with promises of payback when things turned around. The facility loomed ahead, a chain-link fence topped with barbed wire, enclosing rows of identical metal doors like graves in a vast, silent cemetery. The air smelled of warm asphalt and faint oil, carried on a breeze that hummed with distant traffic from the highway. Fluorescent lights buzzed to life along the corridors as the auctioneer, a grizzled man in a faded cap, gathered the small crowd near Unit 47. There were maybe a dozen bidders, retirees in worn flannels, a couple of flippers with clipboards, and Elena, standing at the back in her diner uniform, the grease stains hidden under a loose cardigan. "Lot 47!" the auctioneer barked, his voice echoing off the corrugated walls. "Abandoned 3 months. No peek inside. Bidders beware. Starting at 200. Elena's heart thudded as bids climbed in reluctant increments. She raised her hand at $800, her palms slick with sweat. The flippers pushed to $1, 100s, their eyes sharp, calculating. She swallowed, thinking of Mia's school fees, the eviction notice tucked in her glove compartment. "1 200?" she called, her voice steadier than she felt. The crowd fell quiet. The auctioneer scanned the faces, then slammed his gavel down. "Sold to the lady in the back." Just like that, it was hers. The weight of it settled in her chest, not relief, but a new kind of pressure, like the door was already pressing against her resolve. The manager handed her the key with a shrug. Good luck. Previous owner skipped town, left everything. No name, no details. Just the key, cold and heavy in her hand. She walked the long corridor alone, the metal doors stretching endlessly, each one a mute sentinel under the harsh lights. Her footsteps echoed, sharp and solitary, mingling with the low drone of a distant air conditioner. Unit 47 was at the end, its paint chipped and faded, a rusty padlock hanging loose like an afterthought. Elena paused, the key hovering at the lock. The air here was thicker, laced with dust and something musty, like old paper left too long in the damp. She imagined what lay behind. Stacks of furniture she could refinish, electronics to sell, maybe even antiques. Or nothing. Empty shelves mocking her gamble. With a deep breath, she turned the key. The lock scraped open, the sound grating like nails on chalkboard. The door rolled up on protesting hinges, revealing shadows within. She flicked on her phone's flashlight, the beam cutting through the gloom, no chaos of boxes or tangled wires. Instead, shapes loomed in neat rows. Canvases, stacked against the walls, draped in yellowed sheets that billowed faintly in the draught. Paintings, dozens of them, some framed, others bare, covered in a fine layer of dust that danced in the light. The air inside was cooler, stale, carrying a faint scent of linseed oil and aged wood. Elena's breath caught. This wasn't the junk she'd braced for. The canvases were large, some as tall as she was, their edges warped slightly from neglect. She stepped closer, heart racing, and pulled back a corner of one sheet. Beneath, a swirl of colors emerged, bold strokes of blue and gold, a landscape that blurred into something abstract, almost haunting. Who leaves art like this? An artist's forgotten studio? Stolen goods? The thought sent a chill down her spine. She imagined police tape, questions she couldn't answer, Mia without a mother. No, not yet. She couldn't face it all now, not with the diner shift starting in an hour and Mia waiting at the sitters. Her hand trembled as she replaced the sheet, the fabric whispering against the canvas. She rolled the door down, the clang final, echoing down the empty hall, locked again, as if it had never been opened. Driving home through the twilight, the facility shrank in her rearview, but the images lingered, the dust motes swirling, the hidden colors peeking through. That night, after tucking Mia in with a story about brave explorers finding treasure in caves, Elena sat at the kitchen table under the single bulb that flickered like her hopes. The bills stared back, electric, rent, Mia's asthma meds, $1, $200 gone on a unit full of... What? Paintings that might be worthless scribbles or priceless heirlooms? She poured weak coffee, the steam curling up like ghosts. Memories flooded in. Tom's hands, calloused from work, sketching silly portraits of Mia on napkins. He'd always said she should paint, capture the world before it slipped away. But life had no time for that. Now, this unit felt like a cruel joke, a door to possibilities she wasn't sure she wanted. What if it was trouble? Stolen art, tied to some shady dealer who'd come looking. She pictured men in dark coats, knocking late at night, Mia's room just down the hall. Or worse, nothing but fakes. Her savings vanished like smoke. But then, the flip side. Value. Real money to fix the roof. Send Mia to summer camp. Maybe even enroll in that community art class she'd eyed for years. Hope flickered, fragile as the coffee's warmth. She lay awake until dawn. The sheets twisted. The hum of the fridge a constant reminder of fragile normalcy. By morning, resolve hardened. She had to go back, see it through. For Mia, for the life they deserved. As the first light filtered through the blinds, Elena dressed quietly, key burning in her pocket like a promise or a warning. The morning sun hung low over the industrial park, casting long shadows across the chain-link fence that Elena navigated with a thermos of coffee clutched in one hand and the key in the other. Her old sedan coughed to a stop in the gravel lot, the engine ticking like a reluctant heartbeat as it cooled. She dropped Mia off at school with a quick kiss and a promise of pancakes that evening, normalcy she clung to like a lifeline. But the drive here had been anything but normal. Her mind replayed the previous night's visions, the canvases shifting in her dreams from treasures to traps, their hidden faces whispering accusations. The facility was quieter in daylight, the buzzing fluorescence dormant, replaced by the harsh glare reflecting off metal doors. A lone maintenance worker swept debris near the entrance, his broom scraping rhythmically against the concrete. But Elena avoided his gaze, slipping into the corridor toward Unit 47. The air was warmer now, laced with the metallic tang of dew evaporating from the asphalt, mingling with the faint, persistent mustiness that seemed to seep from the walls themselves. Her footsteps echoed softer in the broad light, but each one built the knot in her stomach tighter. What if she'd imagined it all? What if the sheets hid nothing but mildew and regret? She paused at the door, the rusty padlock glinting mockingly. Her fingers, still rough from last night's dishwashing, fumbled the key into the slot. It turned with a reluctant grind, the sound slicing through the quiet like a confession. The door rolled up slowly, hinges groaning in protest, revealing the unit's dim interior once more. Dust motes swirled in the intruding sunlight, dancing like hesitant spirits over the stacked canvases. There were more than she'd first thought, easily 30, maybe 40, arranged with an almost deliberate care, larger ones leaning against the back wall. Smaller sketches piled on a sagging wooden shelf to the side. No boxes, no clutter, just art, abandoned in this concrete tomb. Elena stepped inside, the cooler air wrapping around her like a shroud, carrying that same scent of linseed oil, now sharper, undercut by the dry earthiness of undisturbed dust. She set the thermos down on the concrete floor, its thud echoing faintly, and approached the nearest stack. Her heart pounded, a steady drum against her ribs as she gripped the edge of a yellowed sheet. It was heavier than expected, stiff with age, and as she pulled it away, the fabric rasped against the canvas beneath. Light flooded the surface, revealing a portrait, a woman's face, mid-30s perhaps, with eyes that seemed to follow Eleanor's movement, deep brown, shadowed by fatigue, framed by dark curls that echoed Mia's own. The brushstrokes were confident yet intimate, capturing a quiet sorrow in the tilt of her head, the subtle crease of her brow. "Who were you?" Elena whispered, her voice swallowed by the unit's confines. She traced the frame lightly, wood smooth under her fingertips, no signature visible on the edge. It wasn't amateur work. The colors blended with a depth that spoke of training, of passion poured into every layer. But why here, hidden away like a secret too heavy to carry home? She moved to the next, peeling back another sheet with trembling hands. This one was a landscape, rolling hills under a stormy sky, the greens and greys alive with motion, as if the wind might whip through the storage air. Again, no name, but a faint date etched in the corner, 2015, 8 years ago. Before Tom's accident, before her world had cracked open, the exploration pulled her deeper, time slipping as she uncovered piece after piece. Abstracts swirled in blues and reds, evoking the chaos of emotions she knew too well, grief's raw edges, hope's fragile flickers. One smaller canvas showed a child's handprint in vibrant yellow, smudged as if pressed in play, the surrounding background a soft wash of family scenes, a picnic, a swing set, laughter frozen in paint. Elena's throat tightened. It could have been Mia's hand, Tom's rough palm guiding it. She sank to her knees amid the sheets. The concrete cooled through her jeans and let the tears come, silent hot tracks down her cheeks. This wasn't junk to flip. It was a life, captured and then discarded, stolen, or something more personal, a collection gathered in desperation. A shadow fell across the doorway, snapping her from the reverie. She looked up, heart lurching, to see the maintenance worker from earlier, a man in his late 50s, wiry build under oil-stained overalls, his face weathered like the doors around them. He held a clipboard, but his eyes widened at the sight of the uncovered canvases. "Ma'am, didn't mean to startle you. Saw the door open, thought maybe kids got in again." His voice was gravelly, laced with the local accent, but kind, without the edge of suspicion. Elena wiped her face hastily, standing with the sheet clutched like a shield. "It's mine. Bought it at auction yesterday. I'm just looking." She gestured vaguely at the art, the words sticking in her dry mouth. He stepped closer, peering in without entering, respect in his hesitation. Name tag read Ray. Paintings, huh? Not the usual garage sale fodder. He scratched his stubbled chin, eyes scanning the rows. Used to know an artist who rented here years back, fellow named Victor Hale. Taught classes at the community center before. Well, before he up and vanished, folks said he owed money, got mixed up in some bad deals, fencing art or something, but these... He nodded at the portrait, Looked like his style, personal touch. If it's his, could be worth a bit, or trouble. Elena's pulse quickened, the word fencing echoing like a warning. Stolen art. Debts that followed owners? She imagined calls from collectors, or worse, angry heirs demanding it back. Vanished how? Police involved? Ray shrugged, leaning against the doorframe, the metal creaking under his weight. Not that I heard. Just stopped paying rent 1 month. Left everything. Manager figured he skipped town. But if you're thinking of selling... He trailed off, glancing at her ringless hand, the exhaustion in her posture. I'd take it slow. Call the center, see if anyone's heard from him. Or the cops if it feels off. Better safe than sorry, especially with a kid in the picture. I saw you with the little one yesterday. She nodded, the helper's words grounding her swirling thoughts. Ray wasn't pushing. He was offering a tether, a voice in the isolation. As he turned to leave, promising to check the old records, Elena covered the canvases again, the sheets settling like veils over secrets. But one painting stayed uncovered, the portrait with the sorrowful eyes. It leaned against the wall, watching as she locked the door. The keys click a promise to return. Driving away, the sun climbing higher, she felt the shift. Not just curiosity now, but a moral pull. A responsibility to uncover the truth behind the dust. For the woman in the painting. For the life it might salvage or save from ruin. Elena drove home from the storage facility with the portrait's eyes lingering in her mind, those deep brown pools reflecting a weariness she recognized all too well. The midday sun beat down on the windshield, turning the cab of her sedan into a greenhouse of stifling heat, but a chill clung to her bones, despite it. Ray's words echoed like a half-heard warning. Victor Hale, vanished artist, tangled in bad deals. Fencing art, stolen pieces shuffled through shady hands, value built on lies. She gripped the wheel until her knuckles whitened, the key now a talisman in her pocket, heavy with unspoken questions. Mia would be home soon from school, her backpack slung over one shoulder, chattering about finger paints and playground games. How could Elena explain this gamble if it unraveled into something criminal? The thought twisted like a knife, sharpening her resolve to dig deeper but carefully, without dragging her daughter into the shadows. That afternoon, after school pickup, Elena kept the routine intact. Peanut butter sandwiches on the chipped Formica table, Mia's laughter filling the small kitchen as she recounted a playground triumph. But Elena's smiles felt forced, her gaze drifting to the window, where the neighbor's overgrown yard mirrored the wild unknowns in Unit 47. "Mommy, you okay?" Mia asked, her small hand patting Elena's arm. "Those curls bouncing like Tom's used to." Elena nodded, pulling her close, inhaling the scent of crayons and innocence. "Just thinking about a surprise," she lied softly, the words tasting like dust. "No surprises yet, not good ones." But as Mia napped in the afternoon hush, Elena slipped into the bedroom and pulled out her laptop, the fan whirring like an anxious breath. A quick search. Victor Hale. Local artist. A few hits, community center flyers from a decade ago, praising his landscapes and portraits for their raw, emotional truth. Then, a gap. No recent mentions, no obituary. Just whispers in old forum posts. Heard Hale got into trouble with collectors, disappeared owing big. Her stomach knotted. If these were his, were they clean? Or pawns in a game she'd unwittingly joined? By evening, after Mia's bedtime story and the house settling into its familiar creaks, Elena couldn't shake the pull. She texted her sitter, a kind retiree from the diner, for a late shift cover, promising extra pay from tips that might never come. The drive back to the facility under sodium lights felt longer, the highway's hum a monotonous dirge. The industrial park was shrouded in twilight now, shadows pooling in the corners of the yard like spilled ink. She parked closer this time, the gravel crunching under her tires, and hurried down the corridor, the air cooler, laced with the night's damp rising from the concrete. Unit 47 waited, its door a blank face in the dimness. She unlocked it swiftly, the scrape of metal familiar now, almost comforting. Flicking on a small lantern she'd brought, its beam steady and unforgiving, she stepped inside, the musty linseed scent enveloping her like an old acquaintance. The portrait still leaned against the wall, uncovered, its subject's gaze meeting hers in the lantern's glow. Eleanor knelt before it, running her fingers along the canvas's edge, feeling the subtle ridges of dried paint. No gallery stamps, no provenance tags, just art, raw and exposed. She turned to the stacks, pulling back sheets with more purpose now, the fabric whispering secrets as it fell away. A series emerged, cityscapes of the town's faded edges, boarded shops, empty lots under overcast skies, painted with a grit that spoke of hard times. One depicted a family silhouette against a sunset. The colors warm yet edged with melancholy, as if the artist had captured his own fading light. Eleanor's breath hitched. It mirrored her life too closely, a widow's quiet unraveling. But amid the beauty, doubt crept in. A smaller sketch, tucked behind a larger frame, showed hurried lines, a man's figure fleeing down an alley, shadows nipping at his heels. No color, just stark black on white. Dated 2018. Recent, too recent for abandonment without intent. The door's shadow shifted again, and Elena spun, lantern swinging, casting wild flickers across the walls. Ray stood there, toolbox in hand, his face etched with concern under the corridor's faint light. "Couldn't stay away, huh?" he said, not accusing, just stating the obvious. He glanced at the new uncovers, whistling low. More of Hale's work. Knew he had a stash here, saw him hauling canvases once, late at night, looking like he'd seen ghosts. He set the toolbox down just outside the threshold, respecting the space as hers. "Mind if I take a peek? Worked here 15 years. Might spot something you miss." Elena hesitated, the moral tug-of-war flaring. Trust a stranger or face this alone. But his eyes held no greed, only the quiet steadiness of someone who'd seen too many units yield regrets. "Okay," she murmured, stepping aside. Ray entered slowly, the concrete thudding under his boots, and crouched by the sketch. His brow furrowed, fingers hovering without touching. "This one's off. Hale's usual is light and shadow playing nice. This feels panicked, like he was documenting trouble." He straightened, meeting her gaze. "Ever think about what happens if these are hot, stolen from estates or worse, evidence of deals gone south? I remember rumors Hale took commissions from folks who didn't want their portraits public. Secrets in paint." The words landed heavy, stirring visions of Elena in an interrogation room, Mia waiting alone, the paintings seized as contraband. She imagined the artist's life unraveling, debts piling like the canvases, a final desperate storage to hide his trail. What if I just sell them quietly? No questions. The temptation slipped out, born of exhaustion, but it soured on her tongue. Ray shook his head gently, his voice a low rumble. "That's the easy door, ma'am. But it slams shut on folks like you. Good hearts with kids counting on 'em. I've seen it. Flippers get pinched, lose everything. Better to trace it right. Community center might have records, or his old landlord. Uncover the story first, then decide. Integrity's the only thing that doesn't rust." His advice anchored her, a moral compass in the dim unit. They spent the next hour methodically cataloguing, Ray noting styles, Elena snapping photos on her phone, the lantern's hum the only sound besides their hushed observations. One painting stood out, a still life of scattered letters and a broken watch, the details so precise they hinted at personal loss. A bankruptcy notice, implied in faded ink, a date matching a local scandal Eleanor vaguely recalled. An art theft ring busted years back, fear coiled tighter. This wasn't mere abandonment. It was a trail, leading somewhere dark. As Ray packed up, promising to dig into old logs tomorrow, Eleanor covered the pieces again, the sheets settling like uneasy truces. Locking the door, the click echoed her crossroads. Call the police and risk losing it all. Walk away from the potential windfall. Or chase the truth with Ray's reluctant guidance. Driving home through the night, stars pricking the sky like hesitant hopes, she felt the weight shift. Not just fear now, but a budding courage, fragile as the first brushstroke on canvas. One painting had already changed her lens. The rest might redefine her path. Comment where you're watching from. I want to know how far these stories of courage in forgotten places can travel. The days blurred into a tense rhythm for Eleanor, each one pulling her deeper into the unit's shadowed embrace. Mornings began with Mia's school routine, backpack zipped, lunch packed with care. But Elena's thoughts strayed to Unit 47, the canvases haunting her like unfinished sentences. She'd started leaving notes for Ray, slipped under his toolbox in the mornings. More sketches uncovered, check the back shelf. He responded in kind, scrawled replies on facility memo pads. Looks like Hale's early work, clean but keep digging. It was a quiet alliance born in the unit's dust-choked air, where words felt too fragile for the stakes rising around them. By midweek, the heat wave had broken, leaving the industrial park shrouded in a humid haze that clung to everything like unspoken regret. Elena arrived after her diner shift, the scent of fried onions still on her uniform, mixing with the unit's linseed tang as she rolled up the door. The lantern's glow revealed their progress, sheets draped over sorted piles, canvases grouped by theme, portraits in one corner, abstracts in another. Ray was already there, kneeling by the wooden shelf, his flashlight beam tracing faded labels on a row of flat storage boxes she'd overlooked before. "Found these yesterday," he said, without looking up, his voice steady as the scrape of his knife along tape, yellowed with age. Tucked behind the big frames. Not paintings, drawings, maybe notes. Elena's pulse quickened, the air cooler now in the evening draught, carrying a faint mildew edge that prickled her skin. She crouched beside him, the concrete biting through her knees, and watched as he pried open the first box. Inside, not chaos, but order. Rolled sketches bound with rubber bands, yellowed sketch pads filled with pencil studies, faces half-formed, hands gesturing in silent pleas. The paper crackled under her touch, brittle as old bones, releasing a whisper of graphite dust that danced in the light. One pad caught her eye, margins crammed with dates and fragments, commission for M. Reynolds, $500, delivery delayed, names, amounts, a ledger of transactions that blurred the line between artist and merchant. "These aren't just art," Ray murmured, flipping to a page near the back. His finger paused on a loose sheet, ink smudged but legible, a contract draft, unsigned for restoration services on a private collection. The client's address was local, a run-down estate on the edge of town, tied to the scandal Elena had half-remembered from news clips years ago. Hale wasn't fencing stolen goods. Not exactly, Ray continued, his brow creasing under the lantern's harsh circle. More like laundering through fixes, touch-up fakes, mix-in originals, folks paid to make their knockoffs look legit. But this, he tapped the paper, smells like he got cold feet. Note here, can't do it, too many eyes. Dated right before he vanished. The revelation settled heavy in Elena's chest, like the dust coating her fingers. Not outright theft, but complicity, a slow moral slide into shadows for survival. She imagined Victor Hale in this very unit, late nights under a single bulb, brush in one hand, conscience fraying in the other. The portrait suddenly sharpened. That woman's sorrowful eyes, now a mirror to his own regrets, painted as confession or camouflage. What if he left it all here to atone? She whispered, the words hanging in the stale air. Hid it so no one could profit from the lies. But doubt gnawed. Why not destroy it? Why abandon a life's work to rust? They worked in tandem, the lantern's hum underscoring their silence, broken only by the rustle of paper and occasional exhale. Deeper in the second box lay something more personal, a leather-bound journal, its cover cracked like parched earth. Eleanor's hands trembled as she opened it, the spine creaking in protest. Entries spanned years, Hale's script tight and looping, early joys of teaching classes, the thrill of a gallery show that sold out. Then the shift, debts from a failed marriage, medical bills for a sick parent, the temptation of easy commissions from shadowy buyers. They want beauty without the blemish, one line read, but paint can't hide the truth forever. The final pages grew erratic, ink blots like tears. Reynolds pressing, threats, can't go to police, too deep. Storage is my out. If I disappear, let it stay buried, for my daughter if she ever finds it. Elena's breath caught, the word daughter echoing her own fears. A faded photo slipped from the journal's back. Hale, younger, arm around a girl of 12, her smile bright against a studio backdrop cluttered with easels. The resemblance to Mia was superficial. Dark hair, curious eyes. But the father's protective stance twisted something deep in Elena. This wasn't just art or crime. It was a father's desperate severance, a life packed away to shield his child from fallout. Ray leaned in, his face softening in the dim light. Poor bastard. Sounds like he ran to protect her, not from the law, but if those commissions linked to the old ring... He trailed off. The implication clear. Unfinished business could drag her in, taint the paintings, turn windfall to warrant. The moral crossroads loomed sharper now, the unit's walls closing in with the weight of choices. Elena stood, pacing the narrow space, her shadow flickering like indecision. Call the police. Hand it over, let them unravel Hale's knots, but risk the unit's contents seized, her $1. 200 investment dust. Pretend ignorance, sell piecemeal through back channels, quick cash for Mia's meds, the roof repair, but at what cost to her soul? The easy path tempted, a whisper of survival's pragmatism, but Ray's presence grounded her. He rose slowly, toolbox clanking as he gathered tools. Don't rush it, he advised, voice low and earnest, eyes meeting hers without judgment. Hold truth first. Track down the daughter. Journal's got a name, Clara Hale, last known in the next county. Community center might know. If it's redemption he wanted, you could be the one to finish it. But if it's trouble... He shrugged, the gesture heavy with shared caution. Walk clean, or it walks over you. She nodded, the lantern's warmth a small comfort against the chill of revelation. As Ray left, his footsteps fading down the corridor, Elena lingered, journal clutched to her chest. The paintings watched, their colors muted under sheets, holding stories of frailty and flight. Driving home through the rain-slicked streets, wipers slashing at the blur, she felt the pull intensify, not just fear of consequences, but a quiet fury at lives derailed by quiet desperations. Mia slept soundly when she arrived, curls splayed on the pillow, oblivious to the doors her mother teetered on opening. In the kitchen, under the flickering bulb, Eleanor pored over the journal by phone light, tracing leads, a phone number, faded but legible. One call could shatter the fragile hope or forge something enduring. The night deepened, rain pattering like hesitant brushstrokes, and for the first time, Elena glimpsed not ruin, but possibility, Arta's bridge, not burden, if she chose the path with heart. The rain had eased by morning, leaving the industrial park slick and gleaming under a sky the color of tarnished silver. Elena's sedan sloshed through shallow puddles as she pulled into the lot, the wiper's final squeaks fading into the quiet hum of idling trucks beyond the fence. Sleep had been a shallow thing, fractured by the journal's words looping in her mind. Hale's frantic script, his daughter's name a fragile anchor in the storm of his confessions. Mia had woken with a cough, the asthma flaring in the damp air, and Eleanor had dosed her carefully, whispering assurances while her own chest tightened with unspoken burdens. The call she'd made last night to the faded number in the journal had gone to voicemail, a woman's voice soft and distant. Clara Hale. Leave a message. Elena hadn't. Not yet. The words stuck, too heavy for a machine. She clutched the thermos of coffee, now lukewarm, as she navigated the corridor. The concrete still echoing with overnight drips from the eaves. The air smelled of wet earth and rust, sharpened by the faint ozone of recent thunder. Unit 47's door loomed, its metal beaded with moisture, and Elena's key slipped in her damp fingers before catching. The lock turned with a wet grind, the door rolling up to release a breath of stale warmth. The linseed scent now mingled with the musty dampness of rain-soaked wood. Ray was inside already, his back to her, sorting through a newly uncovered crate at the unit's far end, a wooden box she'd missed in the shadows, its lid splintered from years of neglect. "Morning," he said without turning, his voice muffled by the creak of hinges as he lifted the top. Dust billowed faintly, caught in the grey light filtering through the half-open door, and Elena stepped closer, her sneakers leaving faint prints on the floor. The crate held more than sketches, bundled canvases, smaller than the others, rolled tightly and tied with frayed twine. Ray unrolled one carefully, the paper crinkling like old leaves, revealing a portrait unlike the rest. Hale himself, perhaps in his 40s, staring out with eyes hollowed by exhaustion, a half-finished background of swirling greys suggesting a studio interrupted. No smile, just raw vulnerability, the brushwork looser, as if painted in haste or haste's regret. Elena knelt beside him, the concrete's chill seeping through her jeans, her fingers brushing the canvas's edge. It felt alive, the paint still slightly tacky in places, as if Hale had sealed it away mid-creation. "He looks haunted," she murmured, her voice barely above the distant drip outside. The journal lay open nearby, its pages marked with a sticky note from Ray. "Cross-reference this entry. The self-portrait. If Clara sees it, tell her I tried." Her throat tightened, the words a father's final plea, echoing her own quiet vows to Mia each night. Ray nodded, rolling the canvas back with deliberate care. "Found this crate last night after you left, hidden under a false bottom in the shelf, clever like he didn't want it found easy." He pulled out a small envelope next, yellowed and sealed with wax cracked like fragile resolve. Inside, a letter handwritten in the same looping script, addresses to Clara, dated the day before his disappearance. Elena's pulse thrummed as she read aloud, her voice steadying with each line. "My girl, if you're reading this, I'm gone for good. The paintings aren't treasures. They're mistakes. Commissions I shouldn't have taken. Fixes for fakes that fooled no one but me. Reynolds and his crowd want them back, but they're tainted. Burn them if you can, or sell them clean. Start over like I couldn't. Forgive me for the shadows I cast. Dad." The paper trembled in her hands. The ink faded, but the pain sharp, cutting through the unit's dim air like a blade. The deeper truth unfolded then, reframing the stacks around them. Not a criminal hoard, but a confessional archive. Hale's attempt to bury his complicity before it consumed his daughter. Eleanor imagined him here, in the dead of night, the lantern's flicker mirroring hers now, stacking canvases like sins to be atoned. The moral weight pressed heavier. These weren't just assets for her survival. They were relics of a man's unraveling, a legacy that could either redeem or ruin. If she pursued Clara, handed over the journal, the paintings might return to family, her investment lost to goodwill. But if Reynolds' name meant ongoing threats, old ties to that art ring, whispers of intimidation, contacting her could invite danger to Mia's door, shadows Elena had fought too hard to keep at bay. Ray watched her, his face shadowed under the cap's brim, the toolbox at his feet a silent testament to his steady presence. That name, Reynolds. I remember the case. Local collector. Shady as they come. Busted for trafficking fakes 5 years back, but walked on technicalities. If Hale crossed him. He let the implication hang, the air thickening with it. Eleanor paced the narrow space, her footsteps muffled on scattered drop-cloths, the paintings covered forms looming like silent witnesses. Call Clara now, bridge the gap with truth, risk the police tracing it back and claiming the unit as evidence, or close the door again, quietly appraise the clean pieces, the landscapes, the abstracts untainted by scandal, and salvage what she could for Mia's sake. The temptation clawed, born of a mother's fierce pragmatism, but it warred with the portrait's gaze. Hale's eyes pleading across the years for integrity she recognized in her own reflection. "I have to find her," Elena said finally, the decision crystallizing like dew on the metal walls. Her voice held a quiet resolve, edged with fear that made her hands clench. Not for the money, for the story he left unfinished. If it's safe, maybe she can claim it. Start something new. Ray stood, dusting his hands on his overalls, the gesture grounding in its simplicity. "Smart, but go careful. Use a burner number. Meet public if she bites. I've got a cousin at the community center. He'll pull old files on Hale without raising flags." His offer was unassuming, a thread of community in the cold expanse, turning ally into anchor without demand. They spent the morning cataloguing the crate's contents, photos of Clara as a child amid easels, receipts for supplies bought in cash, a single unsigned will leaving all works to her. Each item peeled back layers, shifting suspicion from outright crime to human frailty. Hale's burnout, the debts that twisted talent into compromise, his flight not cowardice but sacrifice. By noon, as sunlight pierced the doorway in slanted beams, Elena locked the unit with a steadier hand, the key's click less a barrier than a step forward. Driving to pick up Mia, the highway's blur softened by resolve. She felt the evolution stir, from fear's grip to courage's tentative hold. The paintings weren't salvation or curse. They were a mirror, urging her to choose the honest path. Even as shadows lingered, one call to Clara could illuminate it all, or cast longer ones still. The afternoon sun slanted through the blinds of Elena's small living room, casting striped shadows across the kitchen table where the journal lay open like an exposed wound. Mia played quietly in the corner, her crayons scratching out a rainbow house on construction paper, oblivious to the storm brewing in her mother's mind. Elena's phone sat silent beside the thermos of cooling coffee, the voicemail to Clara Hale still unreturned. The drive home from the unit had been a haze of rain-slicked roads and half-formed plans. Ray's words a steady undercurrent, "Go careful, meet public." But caution felt like delay, and delay like betrayal. Of Hale's plea, of her own fraying edges, she traced the letter's faded ink again, the words "forgive me" blurring under her fingertip, a father's ghost reaching across the years. By evening, after Mia's bedtime ritual, teeth brushed, story read, the soft click of the door, Elena's resolve cracked open. The house creaked in the quiet, the fridge's hum a lonely companion as she dialed the number once more, this time leaving a message, her voice hushed and measured. "Clara, this is Elena Ramirez. I found something that belonged to your father, Victor Hale. Paintings, a journal. It's at a storage unit here in town. I'd like to talk if you're willing. No pressure." She hung up, the silence roaring back, her heart thudding against the walls of her chest. What if Clara dismissed it as a scam? Or worse, what if she came, and the shadows of Reynolds followed, old grudges unearthed, turning Eleanor's gamble into a target? Sleep evaded her that night, the sheets tangled like the thoughts in her head. She rose before dawn, the sky outside a bruised grey, and slipped out to the unit under cover of early mist. The industrial park was ethereal in the fog, the chain-link fence dripping condensation that pattered like hesitant rain onto the asphalt. Her footsteps echoed muffled in the corridor, the air thick with damp rust and the faint, persistent linseed that now felt like Hale's lingering breath. Unlocking the door, she flicked on the lantern, its beam cutting through the haze to illuminate the sorted stacks. Portraits veiled, abstracts waiting, the crates' revelations stacked neatly in the corner. She sat amid them, journal in lap, reading by light that flickered like her hopes. Entries of Hale's early triumphs, the slow seep of compromise, the final desperate bid for severance. A shadow stirred outside, and Elena's breath caught, the lantern swinging in her grip. Ray appeared in the doorway, his overalls damp from the mist, a thermos of his own in hand. "Figured you'd be here," he said, stepping in without invitation, the concrete thudding softly under his boots. He set the thermos down, steam curling faintly, and pulled a folded paper from his pocket, printouts from his cousin at the community center. Clara Hale moved 2 counties over after her dad vanished. Teaches art now, part-time, no record of trouble. But she filed a missing persons report back then. Cops called it a voluntary disappear. Debts, no foul play. But this, he nodded at the journal, changes things. She's clean, might want it all back. Elena's fingers tightened on the cover, the leather warm from her hold. I left a message. What if she thinks I'm after money? Or if Reynolds hears those threats in the notes? They're not ancient history. The name hung heavy, evoking newspaper clippings she'd skimmed online. A collector with a rap sheet of fraud, out on parole, his web of contacts still whispering in art circles. She imagined him piecing together Hale's stash, arriving not with questions but demands, Mia's school photos on the fridge, a vulnerability too close. The unit's walls seemed to narrow, the air cooler now, laced with the metallic tang of fear sweat. Ray crouched beside her, his knees creaking like old hinges, eyes steady in the lantern's glow. "That's the crossroads, Eleanor. You've seen enough to walk away. Cover it up, sell the untainted ones, quiet-like through a fence in the next town. Get your roof fixed, Mia's meds paid. No one'd know." His voice was gravel and honesty, mirroring the moral tug she'd wrestled all week. The temptation bloomed, sharp and seductive, survival without strings, a fresh start bought with selective blindness. But it soured against the self-portrait nearby, Hale's haunted gaze accusing her of the same slide he'd regretted. She shook her head, the motion small but firm, dust motes swirling like resolved doubts. "No, that's his path, hiding the truth. I can't build on that, not with Mia watching how I choose." The words anchored her, a quiet courage rising from the exhaustion like light-piercing fog. Ray nodded, a faint smile cracking his weathered face. "Then let's make it right. I'll drive you to meet her if she calls. Neutral ground, coffee shop. Document everything, photos, the letter. If it's hers, sign it over clean. If there's value in the good pieces, maybe she shares, community center auction, proceeds split fair." The phone buzzed then, shattering the hush, a number matching the journals. Elena's hand trembled as she answered, Ray's presence a solid weight beside her. "Clara, it's Elena." A pause, then a voice, soft and edged with wariness. "You found my dad's things. How?" The conversation unfolded haltingly, Elena's words measured, offering details without overwhelm. The unit's address, the journal's truths. Clara's breath hitched on the line, a sob swallowed. "He left it for me. After all this time, I thought he just ran. Meet me tomorrow. The diner on Main. Neutral, like you said." Hanging up, Elena exhaled. The air in the unit shifting, less oppressive now. As if Hale's secrets breathed easier. Ray clapped her shoulder lightly, the gesture brotherly in the dim space. "You did the hard part. opening the door honest. They spent the morning preparing, Elena photographing each canvas, Ray noting serials on frames. The lanterns hum a steady rhythm to their work. By midday, as mist burned off into reluctant sun, she locked the unit with purpose, not dread, the key a tool now, not a chain. Driving to the diner for her shift, the highway's hum blended with a fragile hope, Mia's drawing tucked in her bag like a talisman. The moral path chosen, tension eased into anticipation. Clara's face, the handover, a life rebuilt from fragments. But shadows lingered, Reynolds' echo, the risk of loose ends. Elena gripped the wheel, resolve hardening. One meeting could close the circle, turn abandoned art into atonement, her gamble into grace. If this story already has your heart, hit the like button. It helps the story of Elena reach more people who still believe in second chances. The diner on Main Street hummed with the familiar rhythm of clinking plates and murmured conversations, the kind of place where locals nursed coffee long after the eggs had cooled. Elena arrived early, her shift apron traded for a clean blouse that still carried the faint scent of linseed oil from the unit, clinging to her skin like an unresolved note. The rain from days before had left the air crisp, carrying the earthy tang of wet pavement through the open door, mingling with the greasy warmth of frying bacon inside. She chose a booth by the window, the vinyl seats cracked and yielding under her weight, her hands folded around a mug of black coffee that steamed faintly, mirroring the fog of her nerves. Mia was with the sitter, safe in the routine of after-school cartoons, but Eleanor's mind wandered to her daughter's curls. The way they bounced when she laughed, untouched by the shadows Elena had navigated these past weeks. The journal and photos sat in a manila envelope on the table, their edges worn from handling, Hale's script a silent plea. Ray had offered to come, his truck idling outside like a sentinel, but she'd insisted on this alone. The honest path meant facing it without buffers, letting the truth unfold in the light of day. The bell above the door jingled, and Elena looked up, her heart stuttering. Clara Hale stepped in, mid-30s, with dark curls that echoed the portraits, her father's legacy woven into her features. She wore a simple coat, damp from the lingering mist, and her eyes, the same deep brown as the woman's in the first painting, scanned the room with cautious hope. Spotting Elena, she approached slowly, the floorboards creaking under her boots, and slid into the booth opposite. Up close, the resemblance sharpened, the subtle crease of worry between her brows, the quiet strength in her posture. "You're Elena?" Clara's voice was soft, edged with the wariness of old wounds, but her gaze held steady, searching. Elena nodded, pushing the envelope across the table, the formica cool under her palm. "I found them in a storage unit I bought at auction. Your father's paintings, the journal, everything." The words tumbled out, measured but raw, the diner's hum fading to a distant buzz. She described the unit's dim confines, the dust motes dancing in the lantern's glow, the way Hale's self-portrait had stared back with unspoken regret. Clara's fingers trembled as she opened the envelope, the paper rustling like dry leaves, her breath catching on the letter's first lines. As she read, tears welled, silent tracks down her cheeks, the coffee shop's fluorescent lights casting a harsh halo around her. "He left this for me," she whispered, tracing the ink. "All these years I thought he'd just abandoned everything. Me." The confession hung between them, heavy as the rain-scented air outside, reframing the canvases from hidden crimes to a father's flawed atonement. Elena shared the discoveries, the shady commissions, the ties to Reynolds, the moral slide Hale had documented in frantic script. Clara listened, her face paling at the name, but nodding with a quiet fury. "Dad mentioned him once, in a call before he vanished, said he was done with the lies. I searched for months, police, galleries, but nothing. This is closure." The conversation stretched, the mugs refilling unnoticed as Clara absorbed the layers. The tainted pieces Hale had marked for burning, the clean works born of his early passion. "He was good, you know," she said, voice steadying. "Taught me to hold the brush before I could spell my name, but the debts. After Mom died, it broke him." Elena felt the echo in her own losses. Tom's accident, the endless bills, a shared thread of quiet survival pulling them closer. No accusations, no demands, just two women, strangers bound by dusty relics, navigating the fallout of another's choices. By the time they parted, the sun had dipped low, painting the street in golden hues that softened the industrial haze beyond. Clara took the journal and photos, promising to consult a lawyer. Clean title for the untainted art. Perhaps an auction at the community center to honor Hale's legacy. "The unit's yours," she insisted, her hand squeezing Elena's briefly, warm against the chill. "You uncovered it. If there's value in the good ones, we split it fair, for starting over. No windfall miracle, but integrity intact. No shadows chasing, no Reynolds unearthed in the handover." Clara's number lingered in Elena's phone, a new thread in the unexpected weave of allies. The weeks that followed unfolded like a canvas, slowly revealing its colors. Elena and Ray cleared the unit methodically, the air lighter now, the linseed scent fading under fresh breezes. The tainted sketches went to Clara for safe disposal, their secrets buried with dignity. The rest, landscapes alive with forgotten light, portraits capturing raw humanity, were appraised quietly, through channels Ray's cousin vetted at the center. Not riches, but enough. $8. "You'll do zero after fees," a lifeline that paid the roof repair, Mia's meds stocked for months, and tuition for that community art class Elena had eyed. She enrolled, brush in hand for the first time, the paint's cool slickness a balm against old griefs. Ray became more than helper, a friend, his toolbox left in her garage for odd jobs, dinners shared with Mia's laughter filling the gaps. Clara visited once, her easel set up in the living room, the three of them, four with Mia, painting side by side, colors blending where fears had once divided. Elena's strokes grew bolder, capturing the industrial park's rust-edged sunsets, the chain-link fences that no longer loomed as barriers but as frames for new beginnings. The diner shifts eased, her tips funding sketch pads for Mia, who traced handprints in vibrant yellows, echoing the unit's hidden joys. Months later, Elena returned to the facility alone, the gravel crunching under her tires like a familiar echo. Unit 47 stood empty now, its door rolled up to bare concrete walls, the air clean of dust and must, carrying only the faint hum of traffic beyond the fence. Sunlight poured in, unfiltered, illuminating scuff marks where canvases had leaned, faint outlines like ghosts of choices made. She paused in the doorway, the key returned to the manager's hook, and traced the empty space with her eyes, the moral crossroads traversed, fear yielding to quiet hope. In that hollow expanse, Elena felt the turning point settle. Doors open not for treasure alone, but for the courage to choose truth. Rebuilding lives from what others left behind. One painting had changed everything, not in gold, but in the grace of honest paths. Subscribe for more stories of compassion, justice, and redemption. Thank you for watching the case of the Dusty Paintings. See you in the next one.